Withology is about the stories behind success. Join host Brian Tierney, CEO of Brian Communications, as he interviews successful industry leaders to hear the fascinating stories about their personal journeys and the people who have helped them get to where they are today.
I also want to say before we start, we're going to talk about the city and what we can learn from the 90s. But I also want to acknowledge right here in the room is the mayor from 1980 to 84, Mayor William Green, former congressman. I want to thank you all for coming here. One of the things, and he couldn't be here in person, but he's here virtually, and is our Governor Ed Rendell. Governor, how are you today?
Good morning. Sorry I couldn't be with you, but I have been battling Parkinson's, and it affects my balance a little bit. My balance gets better as the day goes longer, which is a good excuse for not going to any early meetings.
Well, how you have battled that for years inspires us as well, because of the way that your determination. Even a few days ago, if I can do it, Brian, I want to be there. Charlie, I want to be there. And so we totally understand, and we want to thank you so much for being part of this. And also here is Charlie Peasy. Charlie, I've known for a long, long time, a distinguished career, but became the head of the Chamber of Commerce in 1989. Just a few years later that Governor Rendell became mayor of Philadelphia. And I just want to kind of harken back, if we can, to what it was like in the early 90s before the mayor. There was in the early 80s, we had some good times. By the late 80s into the 90s, the city was like a ghost town. I joke sometimes, like you could see tumbleweeds almost going down Broad Street. There was no Kimmel Center. There was no vibrant arts community. There wasn't any of those things. Everybody was looking for leadership. And Charlie was running the Chamber of Commerce. He's now the chairman of the board of Independence Health Group, and which is a wonderful.
And Jerry Sweeney's here, so I'd like to say I'm on his board too at Brandywine Real Estate.
Brandywine Real Estate Trust. Hey Jerry, good. What a great group we have here today. And there was a sense of hopelessness, and then Governor Rendell became mayor. Charlie was leading the business community, and all of a sudden you had this optimism of what could happen, what could it be. And the reason we're having this conversation is I feel like we're at the same kind of point in our history in terms of the region, the city, the business community, a sense of optimism about what can happen with Mayor Parker. That was kind of what inspired this in the beginning, this conversation. And so Governor and Charlie, and we'll just start it out. The key part we've talked about is collaboration, isn't it? Working together. Governor, would you like to start that out, or Charlie?
Governor, let me sort of set it up. And we'll remember, we were in a fiscal crisis, and the business community was together, but not really coalescing as one. And I really think, and I'll never forget, on the front page of most papers in the United States, the day after his inauguration, he was scrubbing the bathroom in City Hall. And it really said a lot about the work that needed to be done, and that he was not afraid to get his hands dirty. But we had discussions during post the election and before taking office about having a private sector group come together. And you always hear about public-private partnerships. Well, we had 63 young executives. And that it wasn't just a partnership. The governor said, I want you to come into government and really tell me what we need to do. And the business folks said, well, we'll do that, but you have to give us a commitment of what, after we do our due diligence and we lay out a plan, that you're going to execute that plan. That was really a tough pill for a new mayor to take, because there's all kinds of political ramifications. And so I'll give you a couple examples. So could you imagine one of the things the group came up with was we should take all of the vehicles throughout the city and put it under one department. That would give us leverage. We could, do much better leases. But could you imagine what the police commissioner, the fire commissioner, and the streets commissioner said? I'm not going to have control of our vehicles. But, we had a logistics team in place that really gave the evidence, and it's still working today. The other thing was we built we started on a new technology platform. And oh, by the way, the guy who led it, the governor hired away from the company to run it in the city. So it was the start of consolidating all city services under one platform. And then I guess another tough area was he had the accounting firms come in and do head counts, productivity analysis. So I'll never forget this moment when they came back and they said, we looked at the parking authority. And Mayor Green, you'll understand this probably better than anyone. And they said, here are our recommendations. And you said you were going to implement this. Well, that had massive political implications for the mayor. But he kept his word and he did exactly what he said and he instituted these kinds of things. So that was the beginning of the relationship.
Building that trust. Right. And it's not just when you serve on a committee, these are specific things that should be done.
That's the difference. You don't get real execution unless you're getting your hands dirty. If you sit on a committee, you have to take the talk and then
make it happen.
Exactly.
Governor?
Well, let me start by thanking Charlie for doing this with me. Charlie was a great ally for us. He rallied the business community, and it was crucial. He and Ron Rubin rallied the business community. And the business community, when it heard the stuff we proposed to do, was, to say the least, cynical. And it wasn't like Bill Green, Bill, when he became mayor, had a terrific record as a congressman. And all of the business community knew him. So they knew what to expect, and there was a great deal of optimism. Bill made some very important changes, which inured to our benefit, and are still inuring to the benefit of the city today. So I decided that we had to first enlist the business community, and by doing that, we would ask them for help. And they gave us help. I said, send us your best young executives. We want them for 6 months. We're going to put them in the departments. They're going to see and observe things. They're going to come up with ways we can be more efficient or change or save money. And we got some close to 400 ideas to do both from the 63 business people. And when they went in, they weren't so sure whether we'd take it seriously. They weren't sure that this wasn't just window dressing. Well, we took it seriously. I assigned David Cohn, our ambassador, to work with the private sector task force. And they produced, I think we ran it up, we were able to, out of the 400 ideas, we were able to implement about 70. And we started off with a structural deficit of $250 million. The 70 ideas that we took from the business task force wound up saving us about $72 million on an annual basis, and it improved our efficiency dramatically. It was a big success. And some of the people, I was sort of hoping this would happen, some of the people actually signed up to stay with us, didn't go back to their companies. But it was good, and it immediately raised our credibility with the business community because they knew we would live up to our word. And when I assessed where we were in deep, deep doo-doo. We had a $250 million structural deficit on a $2 billion budget, the largest of any city in the country. Nothing seemed to work anymore. We had raised taxes 18 times in the 11 years before I became mayor. We couldn't raise taxes anymore. people had lost faith, and businesses were looking for the first chance to leave the city, and so were some of the people. So I decided we had to reduce services, but we reduced services in a way where I promised if we dig in and did our job, we would be able to replenish the cuts in a short period of time. And then I said, and then we can start reinvesting in our departments. And we were able to do that. And that was important. But while we were doing that tough job, negotiating a new contract, which was a record-breaking contract because we changed so many different things, including things that were in rules of operation. Well, those rules of operation would cost us tons of dollars. And so we fought to get back the thing that were hurting us and running up the bill. Well, I said, I knew that was going to be a long haul. We actually did it in 18 months. We balanced the budget, which I never would have thought we had a chance of doing. But I knew it would take some time. And I knew we had to raise the morale of the city immediately. So everything I did in that first year was aimed at bringing a new sense of possibility to the city, to convince people that change was coming, to convince the business community that it was worth sticking around for and see what happened to us. So we did a lot of things that may have been not very substantive, but sent out a great message, like cleaning up City Hall on the first Saturday I was mayor. Well, we put out the call for citizens to come and sign up and volunteer to help us. And we had over 2,000 citizens come to City Hall on that Saturday. And they took paintbrushes and scrub brushes and did everything. And I decided I had to take the worst job possible. And it was the worst job perhaps in the United States of America. It was cleaning the bathroom on the first floor of City Hall. And I got on my hands and knees under my sweatshirt and I cleaned out the toilets. And it was a great image. It was an image of this guy's going to do anything he can to turn us around. Then we did things like pull for the pools. While we were cutting things, I wanted to make sure that the summer before I took over as mayor, there were only 5 weeks of pools. Our pools were only open for 5 weeks. And there were 10 pools that never even opened because they needed repairs. Well, I persuaded Bill Giles and Dave Montgomery to do a little fundraiser for us. The fundraiser was I could pick one Phillies pitcher and they would donate $2,000 to the city for every game he won. And I knew baseball pretty well. I picked Terry Mulholland, and Terry won 14 games that year. So we got $28,000 and raised over $100,000 throughout the city. We opened all the pools that were closed, and we stayed in business for 9 weeks as opposed to 5 weeks. And that sent a message to the neighborhoods that while we were fixing the downtown, we weren't going to turn away from the neighborhoods either.
Governor, so it was a great photo op besides.
It was a great photo.
It set the tone. I mean, here's the mayor, the new mayor. The New York Times has the picture. The Inquirer obviously does too. Others, but you down on your knees scrubbing City Hall. And then one of the things, like you're saying too, just not just when you serve on a committee, but can you bring people into our government to look at how we're running things and tell us how we can be more efficient?
Yes, so you can't be defensive as a mayor to do something like that. But I think the other thing is important for the Parker administration. I think what the Rendell administration and the Green administration did, they took symbolic things. Like on South Broad Street, there was a library there that was boarded up and graffitied. It's now a model for schools throughout the country. That's where PAFA resides. But that was boarded up. It was these symbolic things that were being done that people said, hey, you know, I think this administration can really get some things done.
Right. Things are actually, I'm seeing them.
Right.
Seeing the streets cleaner and safer. The mayor has talked about, I'm going to have to remember too, next time with the governor, Shapiro, to suggest get doo-doo done rather than, anyway, but that's a whole other thing. Anyway, Mayor Parker's talked about this being a safer, cleaner, greener Philadelphia with opportunity for all. So there is a certain sense of optimism, and she seems to be focusing very much on those areas as well. Charlie, talk about that a little bit for you.
So I think that, and this is what the mayor did, city services, any company that it's customer related, you got to, deliver those services in a very efficient manner. Mayor Parker talked about L&I and getting those various approvals done in a very efficient way. That's important. But it's also important not to forget vision. While you're in scrubbing the floors, you have to have a vision for the future. And that's what the governor did. He provided that vision. Soon after he became mayor, I remember a few of us was in his office, and I was sitting across from David Cohen, and the governor said, I think we should go after a convention, either the Democratic or Republican convention. Well, David Cohen almost fell off the chair because there he was in the thick of trying, in a fiscal crisis, our city services needed to be rehauled. And yet there was this vision of this is what we could be. This is what we should think about being. And really, it was symbolic in that getting a convention was all about tourism and convention, rebuilding our downtown, bringing restaurants in, institutions, cultural activities. But I'll never forget that meeting because, we're working through a lot of day-to-day activities, but the governor had this vision. And it didn't stop just at the conventions. He had a vision that we should really be do things in a regional manner. And he also did that. So it's important while the mayor is today's mayor is dealing with Kensington, that it doesn't forget about opportunities that we have to have. And the other thing is infrastructure. Every mayor who really has a great legacy worked on infrastructure. And it was with the Kimmel Center the mayor started, with the Avenue of the Arts. So you have to think about infrastructure because they're the things that are going to live well beyond your administration, but be very beneficial to the city and to the region.
Yeah, and the way that I keep calling the mayor, Governor Rendell, the way, for instance, with the conventions, involving the community, the business leaders and others to help, and in fact asked me, Brian, you used to work at the RNC, yes. Well, they're having a meeting in San Diego. Why don't you fly out and try to lobby for us to get it? And you felt like, yeah, I'd be honored to ask. I mean, it was thank you. I'd love to help if I can help in some small way.
And that's the other thing. Great mayors really have to have these personal conversations with the business leaders. And that's what, the governor did the best. Just like that example, he worked the phones better than anyone. And it was a joke in the business community when the assistant would say, the mayor's on the phone, the CEO would go, uh-oh. But they knew that he would live up to whatever he was asking for, and he would do double the work for them.
Well, Charlie, you make a good point. And we went after the convention. Really, we started going after the convention in 94, 5. And the city had begun its turnaround, and I was confident we were going to keep going. We hadn't had a political convention since 1948. And when I brought in business leaders and said we were going to go for a convention, they thought I was crazy. And of course, I probably was crazy, but we put together a great bid and we won it. And I knew we got the Republican convention, and I knew that it would be a sign that we had made it back, that we were good enough for parties who have cities all over the country bidding for the convention to choose us. and it was a great symbol. And that's one thing that I think is important. Symbols, always symbols, symbols of change, symbols of getting things done. And Mayor Parker has a great agenda, and I know she's talked about fixing all the potholes and getting abandoned cars off the streets. Those are terrific symbols to the neighborhoods. If the abandoned cars are taken out of your neighborhood, you're saying, my God, you finally removed that car. And then all of a sudden, the pothole that causes you so much trouble every night when you come home from work, it's fixed. And so people get to begin to believe that maybe things are changing. Maybe this new mayor can do stuff. I also gave the mayor-elect, when she was mayor-elect, a suggestion, and she's done a little of it already. We all know about the motorcycles that come up Broad Street on Friday nights and Saturday nights and cause havoc, and it really depressing the number of people who want to come downtown. Well, we've got to break that cycle. And I said, first nights, Friday night, when the weather's good, we should have police laying in wait. And when those cars come up, we should block them in and seize the cars. And the mayor should be out on the street saying, this is just day one. And every day you come up here and try to terrorize people with your hijinks and with automobiles that can cause and motorcycles that can cause real damage. We're going to keep doing it. What do you think people, if we did that on a Friday night, that would all be the only thing people would be talking about on Saturday?
Did we were talking in the prep that you mentioned that it really is, because when you walk out on Broad Street and there's 20 ATVs super loud driving in a reckless way, it creates a certain. And one of the first things that the governor said a few weeks ago when we were doing these conversations was that's what he would do. What are some things? Let's talk about one or two things that you're happy you tried but didn't work out, Governor. What are some things like that?
Well, you've got to try to deal with every problem that comes down the pike. And some of them, the odds on turning it around are pretty difficult. I remember when we lost, when the shipyard closed, that was a very bad day for Philadelphia, and people were depressed. It was a symbol of the fact that we were losing stuff. And I wanted to make sure that we didn't take that line down, that we got going and tried to revamp our shipyard and do some things with it. Well, we persuaded President Clinton to give us $75 million to deal with the infrastructure of the shipyard. We got some business leaders involved in it. And the shipyard is a great reclamation story. It happened way beyond my time as mayor. John Street and Mike Nutter helped the resuscitation of the shipyard. And it was an amazing success story. One story that wasn't as successful, though, is SAP, a great company. They were thinking of moving out of their North American headquarters. And I thought, what a symbol it would be if we could get SAP to move into Philadelphia. And we tried to get them to move to the Navy Yard, because the Navy Yard was a tax-free zone, the state taxes. And we worked on them. I did everything I could. I even had President Clinton, who came up for the Army-Navy game that year, come up at halftime to the mayor's box where I was entertaining some of the executives from SAP and talk to them about what a good thing it would be for them to move into the city and come to Philadelphia. And we almost got them. For the first 10 years, the empowerment zones would give us 10 years of tax abatements. So we were economically on a par with other suburban locations. But there was some clever accountant, 28-year-old accountant, who then did the second 10 years and found out that it would be much more expensive to stay in the city. We came close to getting them, but that was one of my biggest regrets, because it would have been great for SAP and great for us as well.
But Governor, we had 9,000 people working at the shipyard. 9,000. Today, it's easily double that amount of people. So it's how you think about innovation and having these infrastructure ideas. Not only, did the then mayor bring the president to the meeting and show him what the possibilities could be, but we also worked together with, at that time, we had 5 chairmen of committees. I'm looking at Mayor Green because he understands that, and the importance of working with those committee chairs like Jack Murtha, who was on the he was chairman of Defense Appropriations. And we called him so much. I mean, the mayor said, call Jack, call the congressman. And I would call him, he did the Independence Hall, he did the Constitution Center, which the governor made. He said, Charlie, does the mayor think that I am a congressman for the city of Philadelphia? And I said, he does, and you're doing a splendid job. But that's the vision. You're working, and when you were talking about law and order, and the mayor said, we're having law and order and focusing on the order. I think that's really important because, it's about the quality of life, and it's why everybody started moving back into the city. They want to feel comfortable wherever, in the neighborhoods, wherever you are, and order is very important. It's just, I have a personal, when I see trucks on the Kelly Drive, there's not supposed to be trucks on the Kelly Drive. They're not. I mean, I'm hoping we get to those kinds of things where we're reestablishing order in our city.
Yeah, it's a little bit of the broken windows theory, too. I mean, once you start to feel like, let's open it up to our audience here. Any questions that you'd like to pose? David?
Oh, one moment. We'll get the speaker so the governor can hear you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Oh, better.
I was wondering, and I love the get do done. That's going to trend. That's going to be great. But I was wondering, are there some big kind of swing away projects that we need to look at, over the kind of going forward? Because during the time that we were doing things like the RNC, that was a swing away. Can't do that. Who would imagine that? Are there kind of swing away projects that we need to look at going forward?
Well, I would look at, we have 2 major development programs that are being talked about, the arena on Market East, and now we have this multi-dimensional project at the stadium site, which could be a game changer, and Reverend, it could lead to extending the Broad Street subway down there. So to me, that's the biggest development opportunity that we have before us. But I also think, taking care of parks and recreation for the neighborhoods, I mean, that impacts the neighborhood. And finally, and probably most importantly, we have to really raise people up. Our poverty level is so low, and it affects the people that we want to help the most. And that's why, and I'll say this, the governor let the business community go into the education. We had, Rosemary Greco chaired a committee to go in and get things done in education. He allowed us to do all that, but there would be my 3 things. And I think this administration has an awareness of them, but you don't have a lot. You think you have a lot of time. You got to get going, especially in your first year, just to say, hey, this is what we're thinking about.
Governor?
Well, there's no question that Charlie's right about that suggestion. There aren't any really big, obvious single projects that can turn the city around. I mean, the stadium, moving the Sixers to Market Street East has some value, and it would certainly get some vitality in Market Street East. But there's also a good story to be told about having all four sports teams in one location and building around that. So I don't know enough about it to give an opinion, but that would be helpful. But what I think the city needs most of all is to dig into the poverty rate. And the way we do it is through education and through offering opportunities for our kids. One of the things I think Mayor Parker could do very, very well, because she's so persuasive when she talks about these issues, is try to get the business community to this year double the amount of summer jobs they give to our kids. Because our kids need to know that if they apply themselves, if they work hard, if they stay out of trouble, there's a decent life they can build for themselves. And it's so important to do that. And if we could double the amount of kids going into our summer programs, it would send out a meaningful message. And I think that's the biggest problem we're facing is the poverty level. It's ironic because we brought in so many high-end people. When I first became mayor, I think the population of Center City was 57,000. I think the population of Center City now is close to 160,000. And we're the third biggest downtown in America in terms of population. And that's great because we brought high-end people in, we brought educated people in, we brought young people who used to look to live in the suburbs, we brought them in. And it added a lot of vitality to the city. But we've got to take care of the other end of the city as well. And we can do it. I think we can, if we emphasize education and emphasize opportunity, I think we can put a dent in that poverty rate. And I think that would be the most important single thing we could do. The other things are still going strong. The Avenue of the Arts is still unbelievably successful. We've become an entertainment hub. It's city's doing fine in some respects, but it's got to deal with systemic poverty, and education is a way, but opportunities is necessary. You've got to tell the kids that there's something other than getting involved in violence and crime that they should be looking to.
Hey, Governor, remember when you tapped Marcine Madeline to do that program where business people would adopt students?
Yeah. Marcine was a great Philadelphian.
That's an example, too, of like you were asking somebody to do something and it made them more connected to helping make it successful. You know, it wasn't just, again, will you serve on a committee, but will you do this specific thing? And then I'll do specific things for you, too. One of the things that we've talked about with the governor, Charlie, and I, is how it's important, you know, for the mayor to ask for the help, make it happen, and keep promises, and build on successes. Why don't we open it up? Any other questions from folks here?
Brian, I want to say one thing if I could. Brian, there's also, it's important for the mayor to do the little things, too. And the little things are doing things for other political leaders all around the suburbs and the state, and doing things for businesses. I remember when I was mayor, I would help businesses make a pitch to out-of-state firms we wanted to bring into Philadelphia. But I'll never forget, to do this, we have to nurture and use every weapon we have. And Charlie, you remind me of one other thing. I would often help businesses make pitch for business to get the new business opportunities. I would often be asked by some business leader in Philadelphia to get on the phone and talk to a business that they were trying to attract as a client. And I could talk to them about how that business did such good service for the city, because we were a vendor of almost everybody. And I must have made one call a month trying to help businesses get business, because I thought that was my job, to help the city grow economically, do anything you can. So the lesson is, as a mayor, you have to have the big vision. And we certainly had the big vision of turning the city's workforce and its city contract and its ability to get things done, turn it around, bring economic development to the city. But you've got to pay attention to the little things too. And the things that are symbolic, because symbols can drive home a point sometimes much better than substantive. People remember me jumping into the pools. That summer we were in the pools. That's probably the thing that people will remember me most about. I'm gone.
Scrubbing floors, jumping into pools. Yeah. I remember when we were pitching, you've heard that we were pitching the U.S. Postal Service, and the Deputy Postmaster General was going to be coming up, and you heard about it and called me up and said, can I come over? So to have the mayor, when you're come over to the Bellevue in a surprise visit was
right.
Just amazing.
And I remember, you might remember this, Brian, the federal government announced they were going to close 3 regional post offices. And we were on the shopping block, and we had about 4,000 workers in the post office. And it would have been a real blow to lose it. So President Clinton was coming in to make a speech. So I asked if I could ride in from the airport with him. I went out to the airport, and we talked, small talk for a second. And I said, Mr. President, I want to show you something. And he said, what's that? I said, there are 2 columns of figures. One was 211, 211. There were a set of 3 numbers. And he said, what are these numbers? Well, Boise was one of the 8 post offices that was listed as possibly closing. And I said to him, the first set of numbers is unemployment. Boise has 2% unemployment. Philadelphia has 11% unemployment. And I went down the numbers, and all the numbers, Boise was much healthier than we are. And the point was made that we needed the jobs more than Boise. And I guess we don't have to worry about offending the people in Boise. It's a great town. But we kept our post office moving and growing, and it was a real success story.
You know, I have 2 recollections. The first was the week that the new mayor was put in. He said, he asked me, so what's the economy looking like? And because he was very interested, because we were in a bit of a recession at the time. So he was looking at the national economy and what it was happening and how it would affect Philadelphia. Now, he timed it, his administration timed it just right, because, you know, Philadelphia lags behind when the economy is going up, and it lags behind when it's going down. But his administration caught the wave. But the other thing, he tapped everybody. I mean, if he met you on the street, he knew what you were doing, he would ask how it could help the city. He even, I remember he tapped our first lady of the city, and Joe Neubauer, who's the chairman of the Barnes, will remember this. When he tapped, the first lady of the city to go to Paris to the Museum of d'Orsay for the Barnes exhibit. And this was the biggest, at the time, if I remember correctly, Joe, it was the biggest show that the Museum d'Orsay ever had. And our first lady spoke fluent French to the crowd that brought the house down. So whether it was the governor's family, friends, or people on the street, he had a job for everybody.
Well, that was, Midge not only spoke fluent French, but she was a French teacher when she was in college. She was in the student teaching program. All I know in French is chèvre cheeseburger.
But Governor and Charlie, was there ever one incident or achievement that made you say, we've turned the corner? We're now on our way. We're basically solving the problems. Just curious.
I'll let the governor go first. I know what mine is.
Well, it's hard to say one incident because there were so many things that contributed to the comeback and so many things that were visceral. I think, though, the one that I might pick is one that many of you probably never even knew occurred. When the Congress has the Base Closure Commission, and they close military bases every 10 years to save money. And we had 3 bases in Philadelphia, 3 different units, 1 Navy and 2 Army. And all 3 of them were scheduled to close out. That was a total of 7,000 jobs. 7,000 jobs. I single-handedly took charge of our appeal. We were the city appeal, the base closures. And the 3 were spread out. And I decided the only way we could compete would be to consolidate them all in one place. So we talked to the commanders. They thought that consolidation was possible. We can send in a bid where we consolidated all 3 in one location, saved a lot of money by doing that. It didn't hurt efficiency at all. And when they visited every site that they had ordered closed to get the chance for the locals to show them what plans they would have if they could reverse it. And when the guy came in, we showed him our plan. And as he was leaving, he spent about 3 hours touring the 3 bases. And as he was leaving, he said, "That's an amazing plan you guys put together. Who did it?" And I said, "Well, I did it." He said, "No, you didn't do it." I said, "Yeah, I did, but just because they elect you mayor doesn't mean you're stupid." and we saved all the jobs. And that was a sort of affirmation that we avoided what was a doomsday scenario and kept most of the jobs, and it was a real morale booster.
Well, Governor, I remember we were up in Newark to testify before that commission that you led. I was along for the ride, but
That's right, Newark.
On a Sunday. But the one thing that was my aha moment, and there was many, as the governor said, but when the administration said, we're going to start to work on cutting the wage tax. That was even though it was not, once again, it was symbolic, but it went on for years and years. I mean, I remember taking a group of business people up Broad Street saying, we can't not stop that. We can't stop it. But that symbolism of attacking, we're one of the highest tax cities in America. The symbolism about that was just powerful. It was a powerful symbol. Yep.
And I want to tell one last story. We wanted to keep our funding to education growing because funding doesn't guarantee you're going to have a great education system, but not having enough money guarantees you won't. So we always tried to get more money in, and we decided to raise the liquor by the drink tax. And we got a lot of blowback from small taverns around the city. And even some of the businesses, some of the restaurants who were doing incredibly well gave us some feedback. So the restaurants came in with a delegation of about 10 people. And John Street was with me, and we met with them, and they were protesting the increase. And the one who was the loudest was George Perrier, who was a great Philadelphian and really contributed a lot to the city's comeback. But George Perrier was furious. He was talking about how this tax was going to ruin his business. I said, George, when's the last time somebody came into Lebec Fan and asked how much a bottle of wine was? He couldn't answer. He didn't have the prices in the menu. But so sometimes, and the way we got around the local problem of the local neighborhood bars, where the new drink tax might have hurt them, we just didn't enforce. And we let the word out that we weren't going to enforce. So that there was no problem. We had to apply the tax to everybody because there's a uniformity clause that governs a lot of what we do in Pennsylvania. But we just didn't ever bother to collect it in the small neighborhood bars.
Governor, thank you so much, Charlie. I really appreciate this conversation we've had. Like we said, the city has gone through other periods of time where the early 80s we were coming back, the late 80s, early 90s we were down. You brought us back up, did a tremendous job as governor as well. There's that sense of optimism now. And how can we make things happen? Carl Dranoff wants to ask a question. Here we go, Carl.
Brian, let me say we appreciate what you've done. You've become a real leader of the thought community here, and you help us produce stuff. And I know in the story Charlie told, he mentioned Joe Neubauer. And I haven't seen Joe in a while, but Joe is one of the most incredible business leaders any city could be blessed with. He not only puts his money where his mouth is, but he not only writes checks, but he comes up with ideas, and ideas that really were put to work. I remember when Joe came to visit me in my last year as mayor and said, we need to move the barns to Philadelphia. And I said, okay, Joe, I'll see if we can get the Marines to go and capture it and bring it in. I didn't think we had a snowball chance, but he and others persuaded us that it was possible. And that was a great day for Philadelphia. And the museum is unbelievable. It's just done great. And people want to see it. Anyone who comes from Philadelphia want to see it. And then Joe did another thing. When I was mayor, I tried to get the Calder family to bring the museum of all the different Calder works of art over the 3 generations to Philadelphia. But I spent 2 years trying, and finally I couldn't convince them, so we gave up. And then I read in the paper about 3 years ago that we were going to get the Calder Museum, and it was going to be built on the Parkway. And I couldn't imagine who did it. And then someone told me that Joe Neubauer led the charge. So if I could give a wish for Philadelphia to have about 20 Joe Neubauers, and we'd be in good shape.
Governor, one last thing on that, and then I want to have Carl's question. We were talking about this outside in the hallway a little bit when I was talking to Joe. There was a time in the early 90s when Joe, I ran communications at Aramark for periods of time, and I was working there on an outsourced basis. I was working there, and after about a week, Joe said to me, boy, you take a lot of notes. And I said, I feel like I'm getting an MBA, Joe. Hearing you, the way you ask questions, the way you move things along, it just was a fantastic experience. So Joe, from that perspective as well, it was tremendous. Carl Dranoff, last question.
Is Joe here?
Joe is here, yes.
Oh, Joe, if I knew you were here, I never would have said those nice things.
Hi, Governor. It's Carl Dranoff, one of your biggest admirers. And I want to thank you for the Avenue of the Arts, which I drank the Kool-Aid and became a part of it. And there's a plan afoot to make it even bigger and better. But my question is this. Similar to the way we started off with the similarities between now and when then Mayor now and then Governor Rendell took over, we have an issue with post-pandemic workers not coming back to the city and not populating our office buildings. There was a time in the 1990s when we had a similar problem. We had dozens of vacant buildings along Broad Street and other places because office workers had actually moved to new buildings on West Market Street. And Governor, you came up with a brilliant plan for tax abatement. That plan, which was initially just for rehabs, but then expanded to new construction, probably resulted in the greatest building boom that we've ever had. And I think we need something similar to stimulate the economy and stimulate workers and repopulate some of our buildings. And I just wonder if you think that there's a role for the mayor currently to use some of the tactics that you use, legislative, arm twisting, personal relationships, to help us bounce back quicker. Thank you for that opportunity to ask that question.
Well, I would be happy to help, but I made it a point of everything I do to not, when Frank Rizzo left as mayor, when his 2 terms were over, I remember he got a radio show, and every caller who called in complained about something to do with the city. And Frank Rizzo's response was always the same. Wasn't like that when I was mayor. And I vowed to myself, if I ever became mayor, I would never use that phrase. So I don't give anybody gratuitous advice. If anybody wants my advice, I'm happy to talk to them. But I'm rooting for the mayor. I think she just displayed a lot of grit and a lot of political skill in the campaign she ran. And I think she can put that political skill together, and she can put her big personalities on the line, and we can do it again. But she will need help, just like I needed help. So I urge everyone there to find a way to do a little something extra for the mayor and hire a few extra people for your summer jobs program if you have one. And if you don't have one, start one.
Thank you, Governor, for great advice. Charlie, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone. Actually, one last thought from Joe Neubauer. Joe.
Governor, thank you very much for mentioning all the things that we did together. I have to tell you, the governor is very persuasive. We didn't have enough money to finish the barns. And every project that you start in the city, you don't quite have all the money. And I remember Steve Harmel and I went to see him, and we needed more money, more RCAP money. And he said, I gave you enough money already. Go talk to the legislatures and go get money from them first, and then I'll help you. So at the time, I was very novice in terms of asking for money from governors, but I went to a couple from legislatures. I went to a couple, and I had to figure out the sequence because you didn't want to get a no early on because you got to go to 4 caucuses to ask for money. So we got all that done, and we came back, and the governor was very gracious. He more than doubled the amount that we got from the legislature. That's how the barns got done, as well as moving, as you remember, there was a beautiful youth detention center on the Parkway. It's a great thing on your city to have a youth detention center in the major parkway. And we got that done. And Governor, as I get older, I think about what else I can do. And this Calder project really came around. And we were sitting around on the 5th anniversary of the barns, and Jerry Lenfest and Rebecca Reimel sat on either side of Jerry. And Jerry kind of taps us on the shoulder and says, "We got to bring that Calder stuff back." And he said, "It's easy." He said, "You give 10, I'll give 10, Rebecca, you give 10, and we'll get 15 from the governor, and we'll get it done." The numbers are about double that, but we're getting it done.
Absolutely. That's going to be great. And thank you for all you do, Joe. And for everyone, Joe's a great example. He cares about the city, and the fact that he's no longer a CEO, an active CEO, hasn't stopped him. He continues to churn out good things in Philadelphia. Particularly, I think, Joe, I don't know if you've ever told the people here about the principal program, but that's a great program to help strengthen our educational component.
Joe, talk about that for a second. Yeah.
Well, I believe in education. I've been supporting education for a long time. Most of you know I'm an immigrant to this country. And I went to public schools. When I first came here to high school, didn't speak any English. And after we did the barns, the question was, what else do you want to do? That's before I thought about the Calder. And I came to the conclusion that really the city couldn't move forward unless we improved the education system in the city. And at the time, Bill Haidt was a superintendent, and he was closing school because the financial situation was very difficult. And my wife and I were on a trip overseas. We came back, and we had a stack of inquirers on the kitchen table. And with all due respect to the Inquirer, I don't read the front page. I read just the middle section about the local news.
I just left the board this month, so that's cool. That's my Richard Worley and I are now.
I invested it and lost some money in it, also with Brian.
But you stayed with it when we went through the bankruptcy too, which I appreciate.
We did.
And he doesn't lose money.
No.
Anyhow, they were going to close the libraries in 2 schools. One was Masterman, the other one was Central. And I said, this is ridiculous. These are schools that parents do anything they can to get their children in. We know kids will take 2 or 3 buses to get there. And I can't let that happen. So I called Haidt. He didn't know me. And he said, I've heard about you. I said, look, I got simple questions. You're closing libraries. He says, I've got big problems in libraries. I said, I want to talk about 2 libraries. And I mentioned the names. And I said, I have a few simple questions. I assume that the librarians, because they're union members, got bumped down. Can you reinstate them? Can you put them, the whole system, back again in 30 days? Can you do it anonymously, and how much would it cost? Took more than 30 days, but it got done, and it was completely anonymous. So at the end of this was like in the fall. Came May, I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to go see it myself. And you know, those are 2 very different schools. One looks like a mini college, and the other one looks like a regular local school. And I talked to the principals, and they were doing a great job. And as some of you know, I ran Aramark for a long time, and Aramark is nothing but a service delivery system. You know, we deliver food, we deliver facilities. And schools are a service delivery system for education. And the role of the unit manager in my company is the same role that a principal delivers today. It's within a framework, but you can show me great teachers in individual schools, but you can't show me a great school that doesn't have a great principal. So you also know that I took the company private the first time, then went public, then private again. So I believe in leverage. I always looked at leverage points in a system. And to me, with 200,000 kids in the system, I can't help that. Over 20,000 teachers, I can't help that. But about 350 principals, that I can handle. And that's how we started it. And we leaned on the University of Chicago, where I had some relationship also, in terms of creating a program for training the principals, of how to manage their schools. Because there's zero management training for principals. Your great gym teacher, you become a principal. Your great English teacher, become a principal. But now all of a sudden, you got, 50 teachers that you got to manage. You got facilities people, you got transportation, it's complicated. So we started training the principals, and as a matter of fact, Edwin Casada is here with me. Stand up, Edwin, here. Edwin just joined us a year ago. He was a superintendent of schools in Yonkers, a smaller city than Philadelphia, but very similar demographics, very similar issues, very similar characteristics. And we're about to start our 8th cohort. We train between 20 to 25 principals every year. We've had very high retention rates of the principals. Our schools demonstrate, better attendance, improvements faster than the other schools, et cetera. And I thought that after 100 principals we'll stop, but we're now at 150 plus going forward. And by the way, we did it for the public, charter, and faith-based schools. And when Secretary of Education was here 5 years ago, he asked me, how did you come up with that idea? I said, I'm a business person. I look at what the customer wants. The customers being parents and children, and they want a safe school and a school they can learn on. They don't look at the flavor of the school, whether it's Catholic or charter and faith-based or public. And all this noise about charter schools being better than public schools, that's complete nonsense. I'll show you as good a school as a public school as our charter schools. They're great schools and not so great schools in both sides of the circuits. So thank you very much for all of you. We have some supporters of...
That's a good note to end on.
And I want to give a shout out to Mr. Sweetie here, who really supports our schools, and other businesses who supported. The first couple of years we did it all ourselves. Now we have half a dozen supporters, of business supporters, because I realize that without the people being educated here and wanting to stay in Philadelphia, we can't move the city forward. So I'm a very big believer in the city as I get older, and I don't have a lot of time to do things, but we're still trying to do a couple of things here and there. Thank you very much.
And Jerry is a great leader of our port. He's really transformed the port. So let's keep it up, everyone. We can do this.
Great. Thank you, Governor. Thank you. I also want to point out a guest who came in who made things happen, Pat Dion, too, as well. Hey, Pat, how are you? That's Scepter. Thank you. Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.